Hi, Neerath Pillay here, author and investment property advisor. And I'm sure by now you know that the Sydney and Melbourne markets have changed. From the last few years of just massive price growth, we're seeing a complete shift in the market. We've got companies like ANZ predicting price drops of up to $90,000 over the next 12 to 18 months. We're seeing BIS Oxford Economics, one of the country's major research houses, talk about the Sydney and Melbourne markets being some of the worst performing over the next few years. We're seeing CoreLogic talk about price drops as well. In fact, now, rather than talking about price rises in the Sydney and Melbourne markets, the question is how far will they fall? Now, if you've seen any of my past videos, you know I'm not talking about a crash, but the question is, can you even make money in property if you invest in 2018? Well, the answer to that question is yes, but you need to do things differently. Like, for example, you can't do what a very, very common strategy was for so many people over the last few years, which is to buy an off-the-plan unit, have it settle 2, 3, 4 years later and make potentially $200,000 in capital gain. That strategy doesn't work. In fact, today, buying an off-the-plan unit in almost any capital city is a recipe for disaster. So the question is, what do you do? And this was the predicament I found myself in when I started investing back in 2002. At the time, the Sydney boom had pretty much come to an end, and there was very little growth predicted in the Sydney market. In fact, the conversation was very similar to where we are right now. It's how far will it fall, will it crash, or will it just go flat? Either way, the answer to that question meant that I shouldn't be investing in the Sydney market. And so the question was then, well, what do you do? Well, if you know what I did, it's because I started investing in interstate markets when everyone thought I was, crazy. But I made 18 months later, I doubled my money. Now, this is the very same people who were ridiculing me were actually stunned that I made that kind of money, but to be honest, so was I. I couldn't believe my first investment had worked out so well. But the problem was I couldn't replicate that success. Right? I mean, my next few investments, sometimes I made money, sometimes I didn't. And that was when I knew I needed to find out more. I couldn't just rely on reading books and spending time on online forums and looking at all the websites. I needed to do more, and I needed to get some practical experience. And more important, I need to learn from someone who had been successful investing in property over the years in multiple markets around the country and also in multiple property cycles. So that's when I went looking for a mentor, someone who had experience in investing around the country. And I was lucky enough to find an individual who met that criteria and was happy to mentor me for the next couple of years. And one of the things he taught me, which I've always remembered, he said, Neera, it's possible to make money in virtually any market, as long as the strategy you use is right for your goals, is right for your personality, and is right for the market that you pick. And that's what I really want to talk about in this video, because one of the key things that I help people do when it comes to investing in property is what I call strategy alignment. Right? When you find the right strategy for your goals, your situation, your personality, and the market that you're looking for, well then finding the right property becomes far easier for you. So the question is, when you invest in property, my very first question to you is, why do you want to invest in property? Now, most people, when I ask that question, their response is along the lines of, well, we want to get financially ahead. Well, that's great, but you need to be a little more clearer on that. So what I want to do for the rest of this video is look at the big three, the three things that I get asked more often than not, and what I help people achieve mostly when they come to me for guidance and mentoring. And those three things are, number one, I've written them down here just so to make sure that I cover them. So number one, it's how do you build a passive income from property so you can replace your job and leave your job, say, within 10 years. Number two, how do you build a portfolio of properties so you've got something to help your children down the track, because we know where property prices are, they're ridiculously high, especially in our two biggest markets. Or number three, you're looking to retire and you want to plan for retirement, you don't have enough in super, how do you use property to supplement your retirement savings? All right? And so what I'm going to do now is look at those three outcomes and map out a strategy that I think can help you get to those outcomes. Now mind you, none of this is financial advice, I don't know your personal situation, but I want to go through some examples I think can really, really help you get to where you want to go. Because invariably, if you're watching this video, you're looking to achieve one of those three outcomes. All right, so let's look at the first one. You want to build a passive income to replace your salary within 10 years. So let's map this out. So say we are in 2018. Okay, so we want to map it out to 2028, all right? So 10-year plan. The first question is, what's your starting point? How much do you have to invest with? Now, if you have, for example, say $100,000 to invest in property, many people will say, I've got 100 grand in the bank, I want to use it to buy a positive cash flow property. And you can do that, right? You can use your $100,000, buy a property, put in a large deposit, maybe buy something for $250,000 or $300,000, and there are plenty of those around with a good rental yield, and they'll be positively cash flowed. Now, let's just say you do really well and it becomes positive $500 per month. Fantastic. But there's a problem. You don't have any more money to invest with, because if you go and buy a property that's heavily positively cash flowed without focusing on the capital growth, you have essentially used all your money on that one property, and that $500 per month sure may go up to say $700 per month over time, but you can't retire off that. So if you're sort of starting in a position where you have about $100,000 or a smaller amount of money, you need to focus on capital growth. Okay? Here's why. Imagine this. You use $100,000 and you buy a property for say $450,000. Okay. Now, let's just say the next couple of years in total, that rises by 20%. All right? Maybe over the next 3 years. Okay. Well, $450,000, a rise of $450,000 is now $90,000. Now, you've essentially, can you see now, you've almost doubled your initial investment. Yes, if you sell, you're going to pay some capital gains tax and everything else, but let's just say all in all, you're ahead of the game. But now what you can do is, if you've had growth and you've got some decent rent, you can then look at that property and tap into some of the equity and buy again. And you build up, what we do here is you build up a portfolio of properties where each one gives you equity growth over the next 2 to 3 years or so, and then you tap into that and go again. But when you apply that strategy, what type of market do you need to look for? You need to look for a market that's essentially rising, or multiple markets that are rising. Right? You can't buy in a flat market. So if you're starting off now with, as I said, $100,000 or $150,000, whatever it is, and you want to retire the next 10 years, and from a cash flow perspective, don't go and focus on the cash flow first, focus on the capital growth, but then make sure that the cash flow is enough so your borrowing capacity isn't impacted. All right, so that way you can keep buying properties in the future and build up that portfolio where you may have 3, 4, 5 properties, and then you can focus on either selling some properties down, paying down some debt, or then focusing on the cash flow. So that's the first thing, is to look at where you're starting from if you're looking to retire within the next 10 years, or sort of replace your income from your job. Now, mind you, if, for example, say you've had your home in Sydney or Melbourne and it's had some massive growth, as many of them have, you might be sitting on a starting point of, say, $700,000. Okay? Then, what you could do is simply use that $700,000 to go and buy a series of properties that are already positive cash flow, because you don't necessarily need the growth to enter the property. You've already got your good starting point here. All right, so the question is, where are you? And obviously you could be anywhere in between as well, and I understand, and that's why I said you need to really get some specific guidance, but this should give you a starting point of what strategy to use. Because if your goal is to replace your income from your job in 10 years, the question is, what are you starting with? And once you know that, then you need to look at, well, what do I need to do? What are the next steps? And if it's, if I buy one property, it's great, but it's going to sort of run out of money, you're going to run out of money, well, then you're going to end up scenario where you've just got the cash flow from that property, but one property, the cash flow from one property is not going to help you replace your income, right? You and I both know that. You'll need to build a portfolio of properties, and to build a portfolio of properties, you need to work out, well, how much you have to start off with, and then you may need to focus on capital growth first, and almost ignore positive cash flow, but then come back to it. So it's certainly doable. So that's goal number one, plan number one, if you're looking to build that passive income from property in the next 10 years. Okay, so through the magic of video editing, we can see we now have a nearly clear whiteboard again, but again, I've still got my 10-year time frame, 2018 to 2028. And the next major thing people ask me is, I want to build a portfolio of properties so I can help my children get into the market. Well, again, in that case, what you want to focus on is getting some growth over the coming few years and make sure the cash flow profile is strong enough so that your lifestyle isn't impacted. Okay, so what I mean by that is you could buy something for, say, again, argument say $500,000, right? And see how many of those you can build up over the next few years. But again, it comes down to your starting point. So if you have only a little bit to play with from an investment perspective, so you've only got, say, $100,000 again in the bank, or $200,000 for example, you want to make sure that you're using that money and putting it into markets that are again rising here. Why? Because your $100,000, for example, you can use that to, say, get into a $500,000 property, maybe a bit less, and make sure though that the market is growing so that then you can look to sell and have cash to then give to your children for a deposit. All right, so again, understanding what the goal is will help you advise the market. Now, why am I looking at, say, rising markets here for this strategy? Because again, if you want to have cash to give to your children, you're going to buy properties. Because you can will the properties, I guess, to your children if you plan on only waiting till you pass away. But if you want to do it while you're alive, the best thing to do is to be able to buy property and have properties that are rising in value that you are literally looking to sell. So one of my clients, for example, has this game where he has a portfolio of 5 properties, and each property, he's given a name to it. So he's got 3 children. So one of those goes to each of his kids when he sells. And then the other 2, I think one is to contribute to a major hospital. That's one of his dreams. And the other one, I'm not even sure what it is. But he's actually got a purpose for every single property. And they're all in rising markets. He's got a plan of when he wants to sell, when he sees how much equity he's made. So he's got a chunk of cash on each property to give it to each of his kids. And he's not on a huge income, mind you, but he's had this long-term strategy. So again, understanding what you're trying to achieve helps you. So people who, with this goal of trying to build a portfolio of properties to have a chunk of cash to then give to their kids, help with the deposits in the future for their own homes, you don't really need to focus on the positive cash flow side of things. Right? Yes, you want some decent cash flow to make sure that this portfolio can sustain itself. But apart from that, you want to be focusing on capital growth markets. Okay? So that's number 2. Let's now go to the third one, which is, how do you supplement your retirement savings? Well, let's see again. In this scenario, we're in 2018. You want to go to, say, have something to be able to retire within 2028. Again, in this situation, you want to be identifying growth markets, because say you buy properties here for $500,000, and say you buy 2 of them. What you want in 10 years is for them to be worth, hopefully, around about at least $800K each, which is what, $300,000 gain, $300,000 gain, $600,000. You're going to pay some capital gains tax, depending on what the laws are at that time, and you'll obviously get some tax advice around that, but you've now created a nice chunk of cash to supplement your retirement savings. Now, however, some people say, look, that's great, but I don't need the cash. What I want is cash flow, ongoing income. Well, that's different, because in that case, what you want to do is identify markets, again, that have good growth potential from capital growth, but also identify what are the population movements. Are the vacancy rates really tight? Because in markets where vacancy rates are really tight, that are struggling to keep up with the demand for property, what you'll see over time is that rents will rise. And eventually over time, especially if you give yourself sort of 10 years, you'll be in a scenario where the rental income outperforms, the rental income is in excess of your interest costs and your ongoing costs of maintenance, etc. Okay, so again, understanding what type of goal you are and where you're starting from allows you to choose a kind of property. Now, one of the key things in this little videos, I've been focusing on that for all these goals, you've got to look at a rising market. But what do you do if the market is flat? Well, the question is, do you want to still invest in a flat market? Well, sure, there's nothing wrong with investing in a flat market as long as you understand your time frames. All right, so in 2018, I said we've got flat markets in Sydney and Melbourne. Does that mean they're bad markets to invest in? No, right? We still have growing populations. That's where the jobs growth is long term. Sydney and Melbourne are still very, very popular for migrants. So we're going to see some growth, but over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a lot of flatlining. So the question is, how long is your time frame? If you're looking to buy and say, look, I'm looking for growth over the next 20 years, the Sydney and Melbourne markets are great markets to invest in. If anything, you may want to wait a little while and then go into the market, all right? Because there may be a price drop, as ANZ are correct, of say 90 grand. By waiting 12 months, you might literally buy something that's $90,000 cheaper, but then you're going to have to hold on because we're going to see prices maybe drop in those markets slightly, but then go flat for a long time before they start to increase. So the question is that what you're looking to do? So be clear on your time frames. The longer your time frames, the easier it is to sort of almost buy any property that suits you in an area that you like. But if you're looking to accelerate your wealth creation, and achieve some of the goals that we mentioned earlier on, you do want to focus on those markets that are rising and make sure that you buy in those markets, especially in those markets that are at the bottom of the growth curve. Don't buy when they've already risen $300,000-$400,000. You've missed it. Okay, so you've got to become really good at identifying those growth markets or get some help with that. But what about a flat market? Let's just say, for example, you're in a scenario right now where maybe you've got some properties, or you've got a couple of properties, and you want to look to see if there's any more wealth to be created in those particular markets. Well, one of the strategies then you've got to look at, or some of the strategies, is no longer focusing on the market to do the work for you, but actually you doing the work to add value and what I call manufacture wealth, or wealth manufacturing. So what does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, again, you've got this flat market here in our two capital cities, right? And so we really, by the way, what I'm talking about here, you would do once the price drops that are coming end. So there'll be a price drop and it'll go hit a flat point. That's when you would apply these strategies. So there would be a bit of a waiting game. What you would do here is you would say, okay, buy something, and then you would try to get a discount. Okay, now why try and get a discount? Because say something is, say, $700,000, for example. All right, that's a price. You want to try and get it for, I'm going to make this up, say $620,000. Okay, why? Because when you buy it here, you're then going to, obviously you've got your stamp duty, you've got to add then your renovation costs, for example. If you're going to renovate, if you're going to subdivide, if it's a big block of land, you're going to do something to add value to this particular property, all right? And then what you want to do is make sure that whatever these costs are, plus the 620 is less than your end selling price. And so that way, what you're now looking to do is manufacture wealth by adding value to properties. And that's the way you make money in a flat market, right? I mean, trying to get a discount in Sydney or Melbourne the last few years was crazy, right? You'd much rather pay more than the asking price because you knew you'd get it back very, very quickly. But you certainly wouldn't try and get a discount. But today, it's a different scenario. So you've got to understand what your end goals are. You've got to be really clear on where your starting point is. What things do we need to consider? Apply the right strategy and look at the right market for you. And what I mean by earlier on, aligning the strategy towards your goals we've spoken about, aligning to the market, but also your personality. What I mean by that is if you're looking to add value, apply the add value wealth manufacturing strategy that I'm talking about here, but you're busy with your job, you're busy with your family, you're not really into renovations and working with tradies rather than doing it yourself, even so, this may not be right for you. Yes, people may make money applying this kind of strategy, but you might be much better off just going, look, I'd much rather either do nothing, okay, or buy a property in the flat market knowing I'm not going to make money for the next 5 years or so, or you're going to buy, identify markets that are doing this. You see, because if your personality is, and it's like mine, is I am not handy at all, I'm no good with renovation, anything of that nature, and although yes, I made money doing it by employing other people, it's not really my core strategy, it's not aligned with my personality and my time. I'd much rather just find growing markets and let the market do the work for me. So this is another thing, we've got to really get clear on you. When you align the right strategy with your goals, your personality, and then the market that you're looking to invest in, all of a sudden you start to find that you can make money at almost any time, in almost any market, as long as you apply the strategy alignment process that I've gone through here in this video. I really hope this has helped. I've gone into a little bit of the detail here with multiple strategies just to hopefully help you get started, because a lot of people are asking me right now, is this a good investment for me? Or is now the right time to invest? Or is this a good market to invest in? And my answer is, well, I don't know, because I don't know what's right for you. But only once you're clear on what's right for you, and I can certainly help you with that, only then can you start looking for the right investment property for you. I really hope this has helped. Let me know your thoughts in the comments field below, and I'd love to be able to answer them in future videos. Bye for now.